Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome to this video, guys. My name is Liaquat. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. We are going through Mukhtasar al-Qudoori. I hope you guys are enjoying this series. If you love this series and you like my channel, then hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you share the videos with others as well, so people benefit. So let's crack on with this then. So here we have this text. Right, so we're going to try to cover this text then. So he says, "Woman ba'a." Ba'a is to sell. Daran is a house, right? A house which has multiple floors. Dakhala bina. Bina is the structure. Okay, so bina is a structure. Fil bay lam yusammi. This is originally from samma yusammi tasmiyatan. Samma yusammi tasmiyatan, to name. Ba'a is a sell. Dakhala zar' is crops. Okay, this word has come before in zakat. Ard, you know that is land. Tasmiya is from the masdar for yusammi. Man ba'a nakhlan, date palms. Okay, so date palms. Shajaran, trees or plants. Fihi thamar, fruit. فثمرته للبائع إلا أن يشترط. يشترط is from the word shart, which means condition. Okay, condition. Mubta' is the buyer. Right, so it's another word for mushtari. Okay, mubta'. ويقال البائع سل اقطع, cut. وسلم, hand over. سلم يسلم تسليم, hand over. Right, so سلم, hand over. ومن باء ثمرة لم يبدو. بدا يبدو. بدا يبدو. Right, so to become visible. Right, so literally means visible, but in this case it means it reaches a level where now it can survive on its own. So yabdu becomes apparent. Salah. Salah means that it's like goodness, or I don't know what word is good for salah. Salah is qualifies something which is أو قد بدا. جاز البيع. بيع is جائز. ووجب على المشرقات في الحال. حال means immediately. فإن شرط تركها على النخل, then all those words. ثمرة يستثني, to exempt. Okay, so exempt. منها أرطالا is the jam of rital, which is a type of measurement. It's a measure. معلومة, known. حنطة. So حنطة is wheat. سنبلها is the chaff or the husk. والباقلاء is vegetables. في قشرها, so قشر it means it's shell or skin. دارا في البيت مفاتيح, keys, أغلاق, locks. أجرة is fee. Kayyal is the measurer, the man who measures. Okay, the guy who measures. Naqid is the one who checks, the quality checker. Yeah, the one who checks the quality of the thaman. Wazan is the weigher, the one who weighs. Yeah. Mushtari wa manba' sil'atan means goods. The word for goods. بثمن قيل للمشتري ادفع الثمن أولا فإن دفع means to give. Buy سلم باع سلعة سلعة الثمن بثمن قيل لهما سلمة. Okay, right. So now let's have a look at the next part then. So we're gonna now look at the tarkib of this. Now you guys love the tarkib. من باع is فعل. دارا is the مفعول به. دخل is the فعل. بناؤها is the فاعل. في البيع جار مجرور. وإن لم يسمه, the ya gets dropped off. من باع أرضا مفعول به. دخل فعل ما فيها. وإن لم يسمه. So again, ولا يدخل الزرع is the فاعل. في بيع الأرض إلا بالتسمية. ومن باع نخلا أو شجرا عطف. فيه ثمر مبتدأ مؤخر فثمرته مبتدأ للبائع. So this is the خبر, that's the مبتدأ, that's a new sentence. إلا أن يشترطها المبتاع is the فاعل. يقال للبائع اقطع أمر sorry about my coughing. اقطعها وسلم المبيع ومن باع ثمرة لم يبدو صلاحها أو قد بدا جاز البيع is the فاعل وجب على المشتري. Now you can't see the vowels on that. قطعها في الحال فإن شرط تركها مفعول به على النخل فسد البيع. لا يجوز أن يبيع ثمرة ويستثني منها أرطالا مفعول به معلومة صفة. يجوز بيع الحنطة في سنبلها والباقلاء في قشرها. ومن باع دارا دخل في المبيع مفاتيحه أغلاقها. مضاف إليه فاعل. وأجرة new sentence أجرة الكيال وناقد الثمن على البائع وأجرة وزان الثمن this is وزان the word وزن على المشتري يعني سكون. ومن باع سلعة بثمن قيل للمشتري ادفع الثمن أولا فإذا دفع قيل للبائع سلم المبيع. ومن باع سلعة بسلعة أو ثمنا بثمن قيل لهما سلما أمر ديول أمر معا. Okay, so what is this masala talking about then? So what do we have over here? Let's have a quick look at these masail here then. So first of all, the first masala is talking about what comes into a contract. If two people buy an item, what things will automatically be mentioned in the contract? So imagine, for example, this is the contract, blah, 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 contract. So what falls into the contract and what doesn't fall in the contract? So there's like a rule that we can sort of can use. And that rule is this, that anything that is in the item permanently, anything that's there permanently, okay, anything that's there permanently is automatically part of the contract, right? So let's say, for example, you're buying a house. In this house you have the roof, right? So that's permanent. You have the walls, that's permanent. You have the door, that's usually people, when they build it permanently. These are all things that will automatically come into the house. But things like furniture, for example, so in the house, if there is furniture, like for example a bed, it's supposed to be a bed, or like a chair, sofa, or I don't know, gas hob, yeah, these things will not come into the contract unless they have to be stipulated, they have to be written down in the contract for these to be counted. Right, so straightforward, very easy. Let's say, for example, you're buying a car, and then in that car you have the seats, they come with it, steering wheel comes with it usually, wheels come with it. What might not come with it is, for example, if there's I don't know, some CDs in the car, or there's like air freshener in the car, or maybe if there's like special type of seat coverings that they have, or maybe certain type of special hubs on the wheels. So he says, وَمَنْ بَاعَ دَارًا دَخَلَ بِنَاؤُهَا. Whoever sells a house, the bina, the structure, will automatically fall into it fil bayt. وَإِنْ لَمْ يُسَمِّهِ. Even if he doesn't mention it in the contract. لَمْ يُسَمِّهِ means he doesn't stipulate in the contract. Like, he can't sell a house and then tear down the walls and say, oh, I didn't sell you the walls. And say, no, sorry, mate. You have to fulfill your contract, and unwritten in your contract was that the walls come with part of it. وَمَنْ بَاعَ أَرْضًا. Now, what about land? So land works exactly in the same way. Right? So let's say, for example, there's this land, okay, and this land has all right. So let's say, for example, it has some trees in there. Okay, so there's supposed to be a nice tree, right? These kind of things will automatically come into, because those kind of things are normally part of land. But things like crops, like tomatoes, you're growing tomatoes, or you're growing, I don't know what else you're growing things in the land, right? So these crops will not fall in because they are there for harvesting. They're designed for harvesting. Okay, so anything that's there permanently will stay. Anything that's not there permanently, that's meant to be cut off, then that doesn't stay. So man dakhala waman ba'a ardan dakhala ma fiha dakhala ma fiha wa in lam yusammih, even doesn't mention it. ولا يدخل الزرع, however zar', like crops, do not enter into the selling of the land, right? Because those crops are meant to be cut anyway, and people spend a lot of money on crops, right, for harvesting and selling. إلا بالتسمية, except with stipulation. So these would have to be stipulated in the contract if you want them to be part of the contract. Okay, next. What about then selling a tree? Are you allowed to sell a tree? Yes, you're allowed to sell a tree. Totally fine. So let's say, for example, this is a tree and you want to sell this tree. Now this tree has nice juicy apples on there. Juicy red apples, right? So are the apples going to be considered to be part of the contract? No, right? Because they're meant to be cut. They grow, so they cut, right? So obviously the crops one, that was a bit different because you plant the seed and then it grows. But with fruits, they just grow naturally on the tree anyway. But they're meant to be cut. They'll be harvested when the season comes. That's why man ba'a nakhlan, whoever sells date palms, or shajaran, or trees, plants, fihi thamar, in which there's fruit, fathamaratuhu lilbayi, the fruit will now belong to the seller. Right, seller, this is the seller, for example, they all belong to him. إلا أن يشترطها المشتري المبتاع, unless the mubta' in the contract writes, I want the fruit as well. Okay. Okay. Now, let's say, for example, someone sells fruit on a tree. Okay, someone sells fruit on a tree. How does the selling of the fruit on the tree work? So if there's two people, for example, this guy is the seller and this guy is the buyer. Now, if the seller sells the fruit on the tree, right? If the seller sells the fruit on the tree, actually, no. Let's go back before we actually go into this. We're selling the tree, okay? So tree for sale, tree. Who does the tree belong to now? So the tree now is going to go to the buyer, okay? Now, who did the fruit belong to? The fruit belonged to the seller, right? So the fruit, we're going to give it to the seller. Now, if the tree belongs to the buyer, then the fruit are taking up space. Yeah, they're taking up space. Yeah, this is valuable space that's taking up. So what's going to happen over here? So legally, the buyer can say to the seller, right, cut the fruit, I want my tree. Because so long as your fruit are on my tree, they're taking up valuable space. Right? Just like if you buy a car of someone and in the boot of the car, in the back of the car, they've got stuff in there. The buyer of the car can say to the seller, right, take your stuff out, right, because you're taking up space. So, وَيُقَالُ لِلْبَايِ, and it will be said to the seller, right, this guy, it's going to be said to him, cut, اقطعها وسلم المبيء, cut it and give me the tree. Because I bought the tree, I have full rights of the tree. And I'm not giving you rights to keep your fruit on the tree. Now, if he wants to allow him to keep the fruit on the tree, that's totally fine as well. That's okay. Okay, right, now we're going to the fruit masala. I kind of skipped it a bit. I kind of, got a bit excited there. Right, so let's go to the fruit masala now. Right, so now we are going to be discussing the fruit masala. So what is the fruit masala? The fruit masala is basically this, exactly the same thing as we mentioned before, right? 100% exactly the same, but this time you're selling the fruit on the tree. So imagine, for example, like this is a tree, and this tree has nice juicy, again, fruit on there. This time the guy is selling the fruit now. So some people, they like selling fruit on a tree. Normally we buy fruit that have already been picked, pre-picked fruits, yeah? So this guy's the seller, and this guy's the buyer. Right? So if this ever happens, that the fruit, right? Remember the fruit are being sold over here. In the previous one, it was the tree being sold. The fruit are being sold over here. That's supposed to say fruit. So therefore, he is buying the fruit he is. And who does the tree belong to? The tree belongs to the seller. Yeah, so tree is sellers and fruit are the buyers. So now legally, the seller can actually say to the buyer, cut your fruit off and go. Yeah, cut off your fruits and go, because the tree is mine. So long as you've got your fruit on my tree, you know, you're taking up valuable space, valuable nutrients are being used. So what's going to happen? So woman ba'a thamaratan. So this guy, the seller, he's selling thamaratan. Lam yabdu salahuha. Okay, so lam yabdu salahuha. Let me explain something to you what the Hanafis say. Hanafis basically say you're allowed to sell fruit at any stage. Okay, so imagine, for example, like fruit go through like a stage. Yeah, so if we do it this way, they first of all they start off small, and then they get bigger, and then they get bigger, and eventually they become like full fruits. Right. So this is, let's say, 100% growth, and this is, let's say, 70% growth, and this is 40% growth. And this is like small little teeny weeny growth. So in a fruit's life, there is a stage where after this, like for example, let's say here, after this, the fruit can now survive. The fruit can now survive on their own. Yeah, so let's say this is the stage where the fruit can now survive. Obviously, when the bigger they get, the more juicier they get. But the fruit can survive on their own. This is called budu as-salah. In Arabic, right, you call this budu as-salah. Budu as-salah means that they are now ready to survive on their own. In Arabic, budu as-salah. And before this period, right, so before this period, they were غير budu as-salah, lam yabdu salah. Meaning that if the fruit were on the tree at this stage, this 10% stage, let's say, 10% is just a figure I've come up with. But let's say they were at this stage on the tree and a freak storm came. These fruit could die. There's a very strong chance that these fruit could die. But after, let's say, 10%, there's a very, very, very rare chance that they won't survive. They most likely will survive. So the Hanafis say whether they have reached the size of 10% or whether they have reached the size of 100%, as long as there's a market out there for people to buy these fruit, then you can sell them. This seller is permitted to sell fruit at any stage he wants. Okay, so he says, وَمَنْ بَاعَ ثَمَرَةً, whoever sells fruit, لَمْ يَبْدُ صَلَاحُهَا. They're at this stage. Yeah, لَمْ يَبْدُ صَلَاحًا. أَوْ قَدْ بَدَى, or they have actually reached the stage where now they can survive on their own. Right, so بدو الصلاة. جاز البيع ووجب على المشتري قطعها في الحال. The bay is jaiz and it's necessary upon the buyer to cut them immediately. Right, so this guy, legally, he has to cut them now. Just like if I told you, if I sell you a car, if I sell you goods in a car, you have to take the goods out of the car. The car is mine, right? You can't say, oh, I'm going to leave the stuff in the car, by the way. I can say no, right? It's my car. Okay, now, what if this buyer says, you know what, look, the fruit have reached, let's say, for example, the fruit have reached this stage over here. Yeah, 70%. Can I will only buy the fruit of you if you allow the fruit on the tree for 1 more month. There's that 1 more month for it to grow and to become 100%. I want the fruit to be left on the tree for 1 more month, and then I'll buy them off you. Like, I'll only buy them off you if you leave them on the tree for a month. فَإِنْ شَرَطَ تَرْكَهَا عَلَى النَّخْلِ. If this buyer says to the seller, I will only buy them off you, this is known as a shart. This is called a shart fasid. Right, so this is a condition that is stipulated in a contract that renders the contract to be wrong. Yeah, this is a shart fasid. Okay. Now I'm going to explain to you guys about this concept of conditions which render a contract fasid. Okay, I'm not going to mention them to you today, but when we come to the chapter of Bayt fasid, over there I'll mention to you in more detail, right? But just as a gist, what you need to understand is no one, let's say for example there's a buyer and there's a seller, none of the buyer and seller can stipulate a condition which goes against the rights of the contract. So remember, the rights of the contract is exchange exchange. Both sides will exchange, and both sides can do whatever they want with the item. No one can dictate to them or what they want to do. So let's say, for example, this guy sells a laptop, right, to this guy. And this guy says, I'm going to use it every Saturday. Every Saturday, I'll only sell it to you if you allow me to use it every Saturday. That's unfair. That's an unfair condition, that is, right? Because that doesn't allow the buyer to do whatever he wants with it. That's dictating to him. So this condition is what we call a defective condition. Yeah, fasid. Okay, fasid. Defective. Yeah, so defective. And this will render the contract to be bait fasid, a defective contract. So this is what's happening over here. The buyer is saying, I will only sell you these, I will only buy these fruit of you if you allow me to leave them for 1 more month. That's unfair, that is, because that's unfair to the seller, because the seller is forced now to allow those fruit on the tree. Right, so this is why he says, Fasad al-bay'u, this contract will be considered to be defective. All right, okay. So everyone stand up to there? So what's the summary of this then? Just to summarize, that he's basically saying that if a person was to sell fruit on a tree, or anything that for that matter, he can't stipulate to the other person a condition that would be unfair to one of the sides. Yeah, because there has to be equality on both sides. Now, if, for example, he just says to him, is it okay if I leave the fruit on the tree? He's just suggesting, he's just requesting, that's okay. That's not demanding, that's not putting it into the contract. So as long as he doesn't put it in the contract, it's okay. He can leave the fruit on the tree, out of goodwill. All right, next. Let's move on to the next one now. Now, when you sell fruit on a tree, you can't sell fruit like this. So for example, let's say this is a tree and this guy's selling fruit on a tree. And this guy's going to buy now. Right, so he's the buyer. This guy can't say, I'm selling all the fruit on the tree except for 5 kg. Yeah, he can't do that because maybe there's only 5 kg on the tree. Right, so he can't stipulate an exact amount. What he can do is he can stipulate a percentage. He can say this, I'm going to sell all the fruit on the tree except for 5% of the fruit or 10% of the fruit. That's okay. Because if you take away 5%, there's always going to be 95% left over anyway. Right, so that's what he wants to say over here. He says, وَلَا يَجُوزُ, is not permitted, أَنْ يَبِيءَ ثَمَرَةً, that he sells fruit, وَيَسْتَثْنِي, and he exempts, أَرْطَالًا مَعْلُومَةً, a specific measure. Specific measure in this case was 5 kilos, right? But he is allowed to exempt a certain percentage fraction. That's okay, right? Because then no one's going to really lose out. Okay, next masala. Is it permissible for a person to sell like a fruit which is hidden inside of a shell? So you have a fruit and this fruit is hidden inside of a peel or a shell. Okay, so like an orange inside of a peel. Can you sell that? And likewise, can you sell wheat inside of its husk? Yeah, so wheat is usually yellow, right? It's like a seed. And then that seed is usually inside of, let's say, for example, another coat, right? So this is the coat. So he's saying, are you allowed to sell in that kind of a situation? Is it okay? So he says, yajuzu, is permitted. Bay'ul hinta, selling wheat inside of its shell. And for that matter, any vegetables, wal baqila, baqila means vegetables, fi qishriha, in their shells as well. It's okay. Meaning, even though you can't see what's inside of it, you're not being duped here. What is not permissible is, for example, let's say you sell like a mystery box. You got these mystery boxes that people sell. And, let's say there's a £500 mystery box and you don't know what is inside of it. There could be something worth 500, there could be nothing in there. That is a con, it's like a gamble. That would not be allowed, right? Because it would lead to fighting. As remember we said the main thing about the prohibited transactions is that is it going to lead to fighting? Yeah, dispute. Anything that leads to dispute, they're not allowed. And in this case, mystery box, there's a dispute. But in this one, there's no dispute, and there's no dispute in the orange. Okay, right. Now going back to original masala that we were talking about today. If you sell a house and it's got keys, is that okay? So he says yes. Man ba'a daran, whoever sells a property, dakhala fil mabi', in the goods will enter mafatihu aghlaqiha, the keys to the locks. So let's say a guy sells a house and goes, I didn't promise you the keys. I just promised you the locks. No, sorry mate. you have to sell the keys with the locks, right? So keys and locks, they come together. Okay, finally, ujratul kayyal ujratul kayyal wa naqid al-thaman al-bay'. Now here's like a tricky masala to understand, because this is like olden day stuff. In the olden days, when people used to buy and sell, they used to use gold and silver. Now the problem with gold and silver is, one of the obvious things of gold and silver is, if you have gold, how can the other person tell whether it's real or not? So what they used to have in the marketplaces, what they used to have these guys walking around. All right, these guys walking around. So let's say, for example, this is what we call a guy who checks the quality. He checks the coins. So he looks at the coins, tests them, and he'll tell you if they're authentic or not, if they're real or not. This guy's called the naqid al-thaman, right? Naqid al-thaman, the coin tester. Who has to pay for the coin tester? So the rule is the seller. Buyer, seller. The seller is the one who has to pay for the coin tester. Okay, who has to pay for, let's say there's goods. So who has to pay for the goods to be measured? Yeah, so again, you have another guy who is he's got these cups with him, and he walks around the markets and people pay him to measure goods. So let's say, for example, they're selling, like, I don't know, a heap of wheat. All right, who's going to measure that? They don't have time to measure it. There's like loads of it. So then this guy is going to be paid by the seller. The seller will have to pay these two individuals. Yeah, so he basically is paying the naqid al-thaman, and he's also paying the measurer. Okay. Now, when it comes to weighing the coins, right? Because gold coins can weigh different amounts, right? Normally a gold coin would weigh about 4 grams, but they could differ. So this guy is the coin weigher. Yeah, he weighs coins. So he's going to weigh the coins, and this guy is going to be paid by the buyer. Right? So the buyer, in this case, buyer, he is going to pay for this. All right? So this is all upon basically him. Yeah, so he is the one that pays. Right? So the idea is basically the guy who wants to give the coins over to the other side needs to get them weighed, isn't it? So that's the buyer's responsibility. And the guy who wants to make sure that he's given the right amount of product, right? Like this guy. And the guy who wants to make sure that the coins are of correct quality, he's not being ripped off, he's not being like given fake coins, it's upon the seller. Right? So that's basically what it's saying over here. Ujratu, the ujra of the wazan al-thaman ala al-mushtari, yeah, the fee for the wazan al-thaman. Yeah, so wazan al-thaman, this guy over here, is upon the mushtari, whereas ujratu al-kayyal al-naqid al-thaman al-bay'. Right, so naqid al-thaman and the kayyal, the measurer, is upon the seller. Okay, finally, last masla now. So what's the last masla? The last masla is basically to do with legally who has to hand over the goods first. So you got a buyer and you got seller. Okay, legally who has to hand over first? So this is all based upon what are the goods. So if it's cash for goods, yeah, then the guy with the cash, he gives first. Sorry, it's supposed to be other way around. The buyer gives cash, doesn't he? Right, so cash for goods. So who gives first? The guy with cash. So cash is considered to be something which is inferior to the goods. So the cash is given first. Okay, what if it's cash for cash, like a foreign exchange sale, right? In that case, they both give it at the same time. And what about if it's goods for goods? Then they both give at the same time. Okay, goods for goods, so same time. So it's only this one that gives it second. Okay, so when you normally go to the shop, I mean, the cashier, normally gives you your goods and then you give the money. But legally, if they want the money first, that's their right. Okay, so let's have a look at this one then. Okay, so it says, وَمَنْ بَاعَ, whoever sells, in this case seller, sil'atan means goods, in exchange, بِثَمَنٍ, in exchange for cash. قِيلَ لِلْمُشْتَرِي, it will be said to the buyer, idfa' الثَّمَنَ أَوَّلًا. So legally mean the courts will say to the buyer, hand over the money first. فَإِذَا دَفَعَ, when he hands it over, قِيلَ, it will be said to the seller, سَلِّمْ, hand over the goods. Yeah, so cash first, then goods. سلم المبيء, this is supposed to be مبيء, okay, not bay. وَمَنْ بَاعَ سِلْعَةً بِسِلْعَةٍ, whoever sells good for goods or cash for cash, قِيلَ لَهُمَا, it will be said to both of them, سَلِّمَا مَعًا, give it at the same time. So cash, goods, same time, goods, cash, same time. And that's it. That is basically today's lesson. I know it takes a bit of time, but alhamdulillah, you know, we've covered quite a lot. So let's just kind of recap what we covered today in question and answer form. If a person sells a property, what automatically falls in the contract? The answer is the walls, the roof, everything which is permanent fixture of that property or goods. Even if it's not mentioned in the contract. Okay, if someone sells a piece of land, what automatically falls into it? So everything that is permanently meant to be there. Except for crops, which is not meant to be there permanently. If someone sells trees, what's meant to be part of that? It's just the branches and the trunk and the leaves, that's it. As for the fruit, they are not part of the contract unless the buyer stipulates it. So if the buyer stipulates it, then otherwise no. Okay, so what's going to happen in this case? If a buyer buys a tree and there's fruit on there, what's going to happen? The seller will be told to cut the fruit off and hand over the tree because it's occupying the buyer's goods. Okay, is it permissible to sell a tree? Yes, you are. What happens to the fruit? Fruit don't fall under it unless the buyer wants them. And here, they obviously, you know, what about selling fruit and not the tree? That's allowed as well, right? In this case, the buyer will be told, cut the fruit and take the tree. Okay, is it permissible to exempt a certain amount of fruit from a tree when you sell all the fruit on a tree? You can do it in percentage wise, but you can't do it in quantity wise, right? Because there might not be enough fruits on there. But percentage wise is fine because there's always going to be percentage. Okay, if a person buys fruit on a tree and says, I want to leave the fruit on the tree for a month, is that considered to be permissible? So no, it's not. Unless it's just out of goodwill gesture, it's a request, it's not part of the contract, right? Because this would make the contract defective. Are you allowed to sell fruit that are covered in a shell? Yes, you can, right? It's okay. Because there's no deception in there. There's no like kind of misleading in there. What about a mystery box? If it's going to cause a dispute, then not allowed. Like, you know, you get these lucky bags and small little football cards. You know, it's not really going to cause a dispute of what you get. So then that's okay. Okay, what about, are keys included in a contract? Yes, they are. If there's locks there, they're included. Right, so you buy a car, the keys have to come with it. Who has to pay for the guy who checks the quality of the coins, who measures the goods, and who weighs the coins? Who? So the coin weigher is going to be on the buyer, and the others, the quality check, if it's fake or not, and the measurer is going to be upon the seller. Yeah. Who has to hand over the goods first? So usually it's cash first, then goods. But if they're both the same, then both at the same time. And there you go, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson. Hope you guys benefit from this. If there's any questions you have, please leave them in the comments below. Inshallah, I will see you guys next week. Thank you to my patrons, support my channel. If any of you guys want to support my channel and you know you guys like the work that I do, please consider becoming a patron. You can give whatever you want on a monthly basis. It helps me a lot with my channel and buying software and programs and hardware, and then taking out time to make these videos. And all these videos are free of charge for people to watch around the world, and you're going to get sadaqah jariyah as well. So jazakallah khair, guys. Details in the description below, and I will see you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.